Thank you for volunteering for the Friendly Calls program and making weekly calls to an older adult, someone with disabilities, or a caregiver. We hope you'll make a meaningful new social connection. You've gotten past initial introductions and your conversations are starting to get deeper. Next, it's important to give some thought to setting expectations and boundaries. Boundaries are the expectations, limits, and rules we set for ourselves within relationships that guide how close we let people get. Establishing and maintaining clear expectations helps make relationships more comfortable and fulfilling. It's critical to set limits that are consistent with the goals of the program and are practical for you and your new friend. The goal of the program is to connect you and your friend for a series of mutually enjoyable weekly social calls. The boundaries we're asking you to set will help you achieve that. Limit your calls to once per week and about 20 to 30 minutes long. Use your time together to share stories, talk about common interests, and connect. Never ask for or share legal, financial, medical, or personal information, or make any promises beyond your phone calls. These are considered red light topics. They should be avoided. There are also some topics of conversation that are delicate and should be navigated with care. Here are some examples: politics, religion, health conditions, and family dynamics. Setting and honoring boundaries can be especially tricky with these topics, so we suggest that you avoid introducing them. If your friend initiates conversation about a yellow light subject, do your best to keep the conversation light and pivot to a more comfortable topic of conversation when possible. For example, let's say they tell you they're coping with debilitating pain from arthritis and start to list activities they can no longer enjoy. They mention that swimming is the only exercise they can still do comfortably. Avoid discussing their medical condition. Something like, "I'd love to hear more about your swimming. I also swim. I like freestyle. How about you?" It's important to be especially attuned to the expectations and boundaries you're establishing in the first few weeks of your relationship. These early conversations form the foundation of your friendship and establish a pattern for your interactions. For example, you get caught up in your first conversation and talk for an hour. The next week, you keep it to 25 minutes, and your friend is surprised when you end the call. Why is this a problem? You inadvertently set an unsustainable expectation. Instead of thinking about the great 25 minutes you just shared, your friend might be focused on the big discrepancy between your first and second calls. They might be confused, disappointed, or even feel rejected. Friendly calls are most successful when you and your friend are consistent and stick with the agreements you've made. Boundaries may change over time, but it's important to be clear and intentional about it. For example, it's okay for you and your friend to decide that your calls will be 40 minutes long instead of 20 to 30. What's essential is that you have a conversation to make sure you're on the same page and haven't just slipped into a pattern that may not be desired or sustainable for both of you. If your friend asks you for something that does not feel right or isn't aligned with the program goals, it's critical to say no. Be respectful, clear, and kind when you need to say no, and when your friend sets a boundary with you. For example, your friend says they're confused about whether or not to withdraw money they've invested and wonder what you'd suggest. You should say something like, "That is definitely outside my expertise. It might be worth reaching out to whoever manages the funds to talk it through." Then change the subject. There may also be topics you'd prefer not to talk about. That would be green light subjects for someone else. That's absolutely fine. We all have our own areas of sensitivity. For example, your friend asks if you have any pets. Your dog died 2 weeks ago, and it's just too hard for you to talk about her right now. You might say something like, "Unfortunately, my dog died 2 weeks ago. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I would love to hear more about your cat, though. We definitely share a love for animals." Or, if you'd prefer, say, "No, I don't. But I'd love to hear more about your cat." If you're avoiding a red or yellow light topic to follow program guidelines, don't hesitate to say that. Feel free to blame the program. It can give you an easy out from a potentially uncomfortable conversation, and your friend is less likely to take it personally. Be clear and listen to any reaction your friend has, and then move on by introducing a new subject proactively. When your friend shares something they care about, engage enthusiastically. This will help reinforce your connection and diffuse any discomfort from when you said no. If your friend draws a boundary with you, acknowledge it. Restate your understanding of it to make sure you're on the same page. Thank them for being honest and clear, and ask any clarifying questions you have. For example, you ask what your friend was like as a teenager. They tell you they don't like talking about it, that it was very traumatic. You might say something like, "I understand that talking about your adolescence is really hard for you and you'd rather not. Thank you for being honest and clear. I won't bring it up again. Just so I understand, would you prefer not to talk about your past in general, or is it just your adolescent years?" Listen carefully and take a few notes to refresh your memory before future conversations. Honor their request immediately and without exception. Missteps can happen, even when everyone has the best of intentions. The best way to handle it is to assume goodwill. Don't expect your new friend to read your mind. You'll need to let them know if they bring up a sensitive subject. And you can't read their mind either. So if you're not sure about whether it's okay to talk about something, it's best to ask your friend. What if you share something you wish you hadn't, or ask a question you realize was too personal? For example, while telling your friend about your day, you inadvertently mention an appointment with your oncologist. You intended to omit that, but it just slipped out. You might say something like, "I'm very sorry for bringing up the medical appointment I had this afternoon. It was a mistake, and I'd rather not talk about it. I hope you understand." Then shift the topic to something more pleasant. "I would love to tell you about something that happened today. I bumped into my favorite professor from college. Seeing her brought up so many wonderful memories. Did you ever have a teacher who really inspired you?" This gives you the chance to acknowledge the misstep, apologize, and move on. What if there's a serious boundary violation? For example, your friend is rude, becomes verbally abusive, or uses hateful language. Misunderstandings can happen, but you do not need to tolerate this type of behavior. If you feel comfortable addressing it directly and talking it through, that's okay. But you don't have to. It's okay to give yourself some space. Don't feel obligated to make a decision at the moment about whether or not you want to continue your weekly calls. You might say something like, "I'm feeling uncomfortable with what you just said. I need to gather my thoughts. I'm going to hang up right now." Contact your program manager about the interaction. What if you're unsure about continuing your friendly calls beyond the initial 8-week commitment? That's a choice both you and your friend have, and doesn't need to be discussed until the end of this commitment. Whether or not you choose to continue, it's a good idea to mention where you are in the 8-week cycle every couple of calls. For example, during call number 4, you might say something like, "It's hard to believe this is only our 4th call. I feel like we've really connected. I look forward to continuing for the next 4 weeks." This reduces the likelihood that they will be caught off guard when it's time to end your calls if that's what you wind up deciding. It gives you both an opportunity to prepare for that well in advance. In this video, we've learned to set and maintain clear boundaries and the importance of being direct and specific. If you're vague, your new friend might overstep those boundaries. And if you're not clear about something your friend said, ask for clarification. Remember, relationships are unique and dynamic. They will continue to evolve. That's part of what makes them interesting. Thank you, and enjoy your new friendship.